My name is Keith Cambron. I'm an amateur radio operator. My call sign's Kilo Charlie 1 Alpha Tango Tango. In this video, I'm describing a tool I wrote for editing and maintaining amateur radio logbooks. The name of the application is QsoLogViewer. It's a freeware application. It's easily downloaded from GitHub, and I'll say a bit about that at the end of the video. It uses ADIF QSO files. ADIF stands for Amateur Digital Information Format, and that's the most common format for exchanging log files. The other one is called Cabria, which is used for contesting, but is in less use for simply comparing files. QsoLogViewer really performs three primary functions. It's used to identify duplicate QSOs within a log file. It compares and reconciles logbooks. So if you have multiple logbooks, like many of us do, they get out of sync. And if you want to bring them back into sync, that is to have the same records or comparable records in the different log files, and you can use QsoLogViewer to do that. Finally, it updates grid square data, which is very useful for QSO mapping, which is another application I have that runs on my website, radiocheck.us. So with that, let's get into the application itself and see how it works. I've gone ahead and downloaded the file from GitHub. I've created a directory called apps/QsoLog. Here are the contents of that directory. I have two files there. The first is called a jar file, which is Java archive file. That's the only file that's actually needed to run the program. The second file is an icon file. If you want to create a desktop shortcut, then that icon file is useful because it gives you a nice icon on your desktop, but it's actually not needed to run the program. If you want to run the program from the command line, you only need to type java -jar and then the name of the file, which is QsoLogViewer.jar. You have to have a Java runtime environment installed on your computer to run this, and there are plenty of websites that will tell you how to install a Java runtime environment. The great majority of you probably already have it, whether you use it or not. So with that, let's run the program. When you run the jar file, then you'll see this application pop up. And the first thing you want to do is load an ADIF file. And I have two, and I'll select the open from the file menu. And we're taken to a directory that I had previously set up. And this is under the apps QsoLog directory, so this is a subdirectory I named logs. I have two files. One I downloaded from my Ham Radio Deluxe logbook that runs on my PC. The second one I downloaded from QRZ.com. I'm a member of QRZ. I'm also a member of EQSL, Logbook of the World. EQSL does not give very useful exports of ADIF files. They give you a minimum amount of information. It's really not very useful. QRZ does a better job, and Logbook of the World does a good job as well. So let's begin by looking at the Ham Radio Deluxe file. So when I open it, the window's resized. I'm going to resize it again to put it where I want it. And there we go. And we see 5 columns band call, and you can see the columns for yourself, mode, and so forth. We can also see that in this particular file I have 2,600 records, and this table acts much like an Excel spreadsheet, and so you can do the normal things that you can with a spreadsheet. You can cause it to be sorted by call, and there we've got a call sort, or you can sort it by mode, or you can sort it by QsoDate, which is the default. The default is it sorts by QsoDate, and you can sort it up or down. So those are the normal things you would expect. To really make good use of the program, then you need to go to the Action menu. And in the Action menu, we see 5 choices, edit columns, and so forth. So let's start by editing the column. So here we see the 80 columns or data fields that are included in a Ham Radio Deluxe log file, far more than we'll ever really need or use, but they are there, and they could be used if someone wanted to fill in a particular field as part of a QSO. 5 columns that we saw when we opened up are marked with check marks, so we see the call, we see the mode, the time on, the QSO date, and so forth. If we want to add another column, such as grid square, we only have to select that and then click OK. And we see the grid square shows up on our table, and we could sort by grid square if we were so inclined. So let's go back and look at the edit columns. Again, we're not really editing the file. All we're doing is selecting which columns or fields in the records we want to look at. We can also clear all of the fields that we're going to see and then add the particular fields as we see fit. Or we could say set all, but that's going to give us 80 columns, and it's really not very useful. So that is how we go about changing the view, that is the actual fields that we're seeing. The next function I want to show is the find duplicates function. And in this, we're going to go through the 2,600 records and look for duplicates. Now I'm going to go ahead and start that. So I've started the application looking for the duplicate. And it's got to compare every QSO with every other QSO to make sure there are in fact separate QSOs. So while we're looking for the duplicates, and here we are, there were 16 duplicates found, and they're going to be highlighted in the table. So it says sort the table by call sign to group them. So what we're going to do, we're going to find 16 QSOs in here. Now we can go ahead and look down this list of 2,600 records to find those duplicates which are going to be highlighted. And we can probably find some. So here's 2 QSOs that were identified as duplicates. And I'll explain later why we find duplicates. But an easy way to find the duplicates is go to the View menu and select the menu item Show Selected Rows. So here we have all of the duplicates in our 2,600 file, or 2,600 QSO list. And you can see that they've been selected. Now at this point, if we wanted to eliminate duplicates, we could simply select them. And if I wanted to eliminate the first one, W07I, I can select that, and then I can go to the Edit menu and hit Delete, but I'm not going to do that. So that would be the way we would get rid of all of those. When we're done with our editing and deleting of the duplicates, then we can go back to Show All Rows. They're still selected as you see, but we're back to our original view. Duplicates end up in these files because, in my experience, I report a QSO, another operator, the other operator I worked, reports the QSO, and the information is slightly different. One of our clocks are off, or we report perhaps a different mode. If you're operating digital modes, for example, some people report that as FT8 or PSK31. Other operators report that as single sideband because that's the mode of the transceiver, and they're using CAT software on their computer to demodulate and modulate those particular modes. So it's a different interpretation on how to build a QSO. If you delete their record from sites like QRZ or EQSL or Logbook of the World, you affect their ability to get awards. So I typically don't delete those duplicates because I don't want to affect their award. I do like to keep my QSO record intact, though, as I reported it. So that's how I ended up with 16 duplicates, which is really 8 duplicates. There are 16 records that are affected, but only 8 of them are truly duplicates. So that is how to use the duplicate function. Another function that is useful is the check all states function. A lot of operators like to say they have worked all states and get awards for that, so we'll run that as well. And the application found all the states, so I've got a confirmation that I've worked 50 states. It's helpful if you don't have all the states. This particular function will tell you which states you're missing, which isn't always easy to find. So that's the all states function. The next function I want to show you is the compare files function. So I'm going to select compare files. So I've got the HRD already loaded, and we can see that by the title bar. I'm going to select the QRZ file I downloaded, and we'll compare the QRZ file with the Ham Radio Deluxe file. So here goes the comparison. Now the application is going to warn me about the duplicates in the HRD file to begin with. So we're going to see a warning about that, but I've already said I accept those duplicates as they are, and that's fine for me. I'm not going to try to fix those 8 duplicates I actually have. Here's the warning of the 16 duplicates. Recommended I run find duplicates and remove those before doing compare, but I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. I'm not going to cancel the compare. And here's the result of the compare. There were 3 records that were found in the HRD file, but they're not in the QRZ file. So for some reason, I did not upload those to the QRZ file, or I edit them in QRZ, but they're not in QRZ. So I can update the QRZ file by doing the following. I'm going to, once again, edit the selected records, because what's happening is the application is going to highlight the records that are in the HRD file but not in the QRZ file. So I'll click OK, and then rather than scan through the whole file and look for the selected records, we're going to go back to View, Show Selected Records, and here are the 3 records that are in HRD but not in the QRZ file. So if I wanted to, I can create a file, an ADIF file of these 3 records, and then upload them to QRZ. But I've already checked these out for other reasons and decided not to do that. But that's how you would go about that. You do not modify the HRD file or the QRZ file. What you want to do is create an ADIF file for export, and you would just do that by hitting the save here. So let's go back and view all records again. show all rows, and look at one last function, and that function is update grid information. And I'll select that. And there was an analysis done of all my grid information. Now, grid square information is useful for QSO mapping and some other things, but to get a good map, you need 6-character grid square information. FT8 as an example only gives you 4 characters in grid square, so there's a lot of inaccuracy of that. So I wrote this particular function to enable me to upgrade FT8 information in particular to get to 6 characters so I can get a better map. And the way to do that is to use the services of either hamqh.com or qrz.com. And what we're going to do is we're going to upgrade our 4 characters or missing records with any information that is at these websites. So I'm going to use QRZ today. I've got subscription with QRZ and I'm registered at hamqth.com. Hamqth.com is a free website, and of course you pay a subscriber fee at QRZ to have an XML interface exposed to you. It's called an XML subscriber, which I am. So let me go to that. I need to enter my user ID, which is my call sign. And then I need to enter my password, which I'll do. And then I'll hit update records. Now I've already updated this file, so we find there, out of the 2631 records, there are 31 that lacked any grid information, and there are 91 that have only 4-character grid information, and we want 6. So that's what we're going to do. So now we'll hit update, and we see 19, 20, 22 records are being updated, 23. Okay, 23 records out of the total of, looks like 122 were updated. And the reason more weren't updated is because those operators' information is not in qrz.com. So I'll click OK. So now I've got an updated HRD file, and I want to save that. The safest thing to do is not to try to save that as the original file, but create an updated file. And then you can decide if you want to use that file to revise your HRD logbook. So I'll say upgraded. And the reason I did it this way, the first rule of programming is do no harm. In this way, I haven't disturbed the original file, and I've got an upgraded file. I can kind of compare the size of the two and decide if I want to delete my records in Ham Radio Deluxe and replace it with the QSOs that are in this file. So there, I've saved it, and I've got 2631 records in that file, and if I wanted to use that to upgrade my HRD logbook, I could do that. And we're going to see the grid square information. If I go to open, so here we see grid square information. If I open Ham Radio Deluxe upgraded, and resize that, what we see is I have now 6 character grid square information, where before I had 4 characters. So this is much more useful for QSO mapping. So that concludes my section on how to use QsoLogViewer. Now let me give you some resources. Here's a list of resources. one on contesting software if you're interested in that. So that's software you can use for contesting. Electronic logs, there's a nice tutorial at arrl.org on Cabrillo in particular, which of course is used only for contesting. Free logging software, 2 sources, and finally, here's the URL if you want to download this application. Remember, you only have to download the jar file if you want to get started. You can download the icon file, and there are complete instructions on how to download and get started at this URL.